Hello and well met. This is Leyron with the Advanced Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be talking about generative AI tools and creating content for virtual tabletops such as Fantasy Grounds. Early on, when I first started doing this, I want to say it's about a year and a half, over a year ago, the tools were not quite mature enough. They were still very rude and crude, and they basically brought about quite a bit of controversy because one, the quality wasn't there. Two, there were some ethical things about where the generative AI tools were training. It's been stated but not proven that a lot of the sources used were illegal or that they were not given permission to do so. So I think in this time frame, a lot of things have changed and grown. So, for instance, a lot of big tech companies are now using AI in just about everything. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean people are embracing it, but it's coming. The other thing is that the quality has certainly increased in a lot of ways. You don't have the six fingers as much anymore. Sometimes the eyes are weird, or the pose, or things like that. But generally, the images are the generated images are essentially a lot better than they used to be in far as quality and how they look. Also, I've learned that not any one particular AI tool fits all. So over my journey of researching and looking at these tools and trying them out, practicing and such, I've noticed that there are certain tools that do better at certain things, and that takes a while to discover what that was. So, for instance, when using AI tools to create content, you'll have different choices out there, some free, some paid. I found that the subscription model, it kind of sucks, but at the same time, it helps ensure that you get more iterations. You usually get a longer context window, which is how long the response or the request is, and then also the output quality. So sometimes you're limited to so many characters or a lower quality image or something like that. So there are different limitations to the free um, subscriptions and things like that. So I wanted to say that some of the things I'd like to cover here and just kind of briefly touch on these things. So generating adventures, NPCs, and stat blocks with AI works pretty good, but you do have to feed it your output that you're looking for. So basically like a template. Crafting visuals, I'm going to use Ideogram for that. I mean, I could do it with Midjourney or ChatGPT, but I found that Ideogram for me personally works best. It gives me a little bit more control than I get over the other two. And also, I just like the results and the tools and the interface. So, I don't mind paying the $20 a month or whatever. No, Google Notebook LM is really big. I think it is going to really help people outside of just role-playing games. This basically lets you organize your information. So you can upload up to 50 sources. So you could upload as long as it's under 100 or 200 megabytes, you can upload your PDFs to it and basically feed it some links. So if you're a Pathfinder user, just give it the core rule books, which most of those are less than 100 megs, which is really nice because Paizo does a really good job with compressing their data. And also you have the archives of Nethys, you have some fan stuff. So if you feed GoogleLM those sources, you'll have a pretty good repository of information that you can refer to. So if you're going to create content or you want to look up rules or anything like that, that is the way to go. So GoogleLM is really good at organizing information and querying stuff. So if you want to do research and look at all your resources in a kind of a one-stop shop, that is the way to go. So you don't have to have 10 PDFs open. You can just feed them all into that. And hopefully, just the rule books. I don't know if you'd necessarily have to put the adventure paths in there unless it was critical to your work. And that would really help. The other thing is for stories and for dialogue and for writing, like creative writing, that sort of thing. I tend to use Claude, which is Anthropic's AI tool. it just seems to have a little bit more of a natural feel to it. It doesn't feel as ChatGPT or robotic, and it just seems to do better with writing in general. So I'll use Claude if I'm really getting into story, dialogue, writing short novels, that sort of thing. And just remember, when you're creating larger projects, you kind of have to take it in bite sizes. So you don't want to write the entire book in one prompt. You have to kind of break it up into an outline, and then each chapter write that as a separate instance. And then hopefully you can bring it together at the end. So you can do that and then use GoogleLM to organize it. So you can pass information back and forth between your AI accounts to create content. So you're not just stuck with ChatGPT all the time. Speaking of ChatGPT, I kind of use it for brainstorming and everyday content creation. Just use it for kind of like a utility overall kind of tool. So I don't use it as focused as I would some of the other ones, some of the other AI tools, but I do use it for daily use for just all kinds of different things, not just role-playing games, but it seems to be fairly utility and diverse, so that's why I still subscribe to ChatGPT. But to be honest, at this point, I could probably do without it in most cases. So I could use Claude, GoogleLM, and Ideogram to basically carry out the functions that I would need to create content. ChatGPT, though, is a very good universal overall type tool. So some people are heavily into one or the other, or they like Midjourney. Midjourney more focuses on image creation. You can make some really beautiful, art and, generative images, but I don't really care for the aesthetic of it. And it could be that I'm using it wrong or I'm not giving it the right prompts. So let's talk a little bit about the prompt engineering. So I don't know a good way to show that other than to just say that you have to experiment. You can look online for examples or watch videos of other people doing it. And that's kind of how I learned, is just by, trial and error. There are guides out there, but by the time you read them and implement them, the AI tools have changed. So I don't rely on the tutorials too much, but once you learn the basics of how the structure a prompt, it really does make a difference in the long run. So you don't want a prompt to be like 6 paragraphs, but you also don't want just 1 or 2 sentences. You got to find that happy medium, that balance in between description and non-needed or non-essential information. If you give the AI tools a bunch of unrelated or specific names or places, sometimes it will confuse it. So you got to kind of learn what the tools will benefit from as far as your inputted information. And I cannot state enough how important it is to provide examples. So it really helps if you have an outputted example of the type of response that you're looking for. So if you want something to look a certain way, maybe upload or provide an image if your tool allows that, and it will kind of get an idea. Also, you can take scans or images and feed those into like ChatGPT, and those will also give you some results. So for instance, if you found a really cool picture and you just want the colors and the aesthetic and the shapes and stuff, it'll take that information. We're never going to get an exact copy because that's built into the design, but essentially you'll get kind of the essence of the image that you're trying to produce. And then, of course, let's talk about some tips for AI tools. So the human touch is still required. I mean, it's necessary. You don't want to rely or replace your own creativity with AI. So it's kind of a double standard here, like, oh, don't use AI, but use AI. It's kind of a balance between your ethics, what you're trying to achieve, and what your comfort level is with AI tools. So don't use it as a replacement. Use it as an enhancement to your own creativity. When you use your personal experiences and creativity to refine the output and the content, it shows. And it will be a lot less robotic, a lot less ChatGPT or AI produced looking. Avoid over-relying on it. AI writing can get very cliche and robotic, and you'll see that after a while, the stuff looks really repetitive. and it uses words that some people would never use, and it gets very detectable after a while. You'll start to notice. Remix the AI content. So what I'm saying is, if it outputs something that looks too robotic or too unbelievable, you can put it in another AI tool, or there's even tools out there that will humanize your outputs. It's less cheesy or less generic or less strange on the wording. Understand your audience. This is really important. So if you're doing this for yourself, probably not a big deal. But even though there are major tech companies like Google, Microsoft, Adobe, and such using AI tools, your fans or your customers or even your players may not fully embrace it. They may not like it. So you have to balance your innovation with trust. So if you're going to use AI tools, make sure you disclose that. Don't lie about it. Don't try to pass it off as your own. People will know. They'll find out eventually. So if you're going to be doing a Kickstarter or paid content or like putting stuff on the Fantasy Grounds Forge, make sure you disclose that information in your source. And that's kind of the bottom line anyways with publishing on most platforms, is they want you to state that ahead of time. And some don't even want that. But just remember that, you know, you will get found out eventually. And then also keep evolving. So AI tools constantly update and improve. Sometimes they get worse. I've had where certain things used to be cool and used to produce certain results, and then they change the model, and then it messes everything up. So just keep that in mind. So stay informed about new features. You know, try to watch videos and do what you can to keep up on the changes and the evolution. And also the laws are changing too. So keep that in mind. So the key programs that I'm using right now are 4. So I'm using GoogleLM, I'm using ChatGPT, I'm using Claude, and I'm using Ideogram. They all have strengths and weaknesses. So AI tools are powerful, but your creativity and originality make your work stand out. So use AI to enhance storytelling, not replacing it. Keep experimenting, refining your process to deliver the best content as possible. And remember, for personal use, probably not such a big deal, but when you start getting into selling stuff and trying to pass it off as your own, make sure that you disclose that you're using AI tools. So that's kind of my rundown of the different types of tools that I'm using personally. Some of you may or may not be using this stuff, but I'll give you kind of a short demo of some of the things that you can expect from some of these tools. So you can put links into Fantasy Grounds and then have those shortcutted so that you can click on them. It makes it a little more convenient to get to these. So we'll start with GoogleLM. So I'll click on this link, hit yes, and that'll take me to GoogleLM. So this is basically the interface. What this does is you can create notebooks. Eventually, it's just a bunch of research links, whatever you added to make your content. So for instance, I made one for Pathfinder, and what I have in Pathfinder is a whole bunch of the OGL stuff and some reference data, and then also the main core rulebook. So those are my sources, and I have a link to, I want to say I add a link to the, I want to say this is going to be Archives of Nethys, let's say. Okay, so Archives of Nethys is a really good repository for rules and such. So this is the 2nd edition Pathfinder 2. So I'm going to actually copy and paste this, and I'm going to use this as a source. So when I go add source, you have stuff from your Google Drive or slides. It can do documents or slides. You can do a website or a YouTube video or just copy and pasted text. So in this case, I'm going to do website. And I'm going to put that Archives of Nethys in there, hit insert, and now that's adding that as a source. So when I do queries or looking up things, it will have that source available. So this is a really nice way to organize information, pull data from sources, and to get a kind of a really nice polished set of outlines, that sort of thing. So this is helpful for organize information, consolidating your resources, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, rule sets like D&D don't have PDFs, but what I did is I took and made my own repository from D&D Beyond. So all this pasted text here are sections of the newer 2024 content on D&D Beyond. And basically, I built my own reference tools for that, copying and pasting from the website. So I don't have PDFs that that show how basically have the rules in it. These are just references. And then I also have some YouTube videos that talk about the rules and such. So it isn't just PDFs. You can also add YouTube videos. So if you wanted to find out some kind of rules or some specific things, that's what this would be good for. So that's, basically GoogleLM is a really good research organizational tool. I recommend it for any rule set as long as you have sources and you have use cases for it. It'll be very helpful to you. Let's go to the next one is Ideogram. So this is the main image generation tool that I use. Took me about a month to get used to how to use it, but I've used this in other videos. But essentially, these are other images that other people have created using this tool. But it does a really good job with having a little bit more control over the content. It has a background removal function, so if you make this character, you can take out the background a lot easier, so you don't have to do it manually. And it has a new batch feature. So when you have batch generation here, you can create large batches. You can save time, and you can create images in bulk. So you can upload a spreadsheet with your prompts, and you can come back later as it's finishing the images. So if you have a bunch of them to do, and you have a really nicely designed prompt, you can crank out some work if you really had to. So that's kind of a new feature. And then you have this canvas feature where you can take images and you can extend them, you can remix them, you can fill, like you can fill in, let's see, this magic fill, you can use a mask to fill in certain areas. So it's kind of an editing tool. And then there's an actual editor where you can take the ear and cut off the tips here, and you can modify the eyes, whatever you need to do. This kind of has a studio built into it, so you can make some modifications, and then it basically regenerates it based off the last image. So it kind of works sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on how much of the area you select and what you're trying to edit. So it depends also on what it is. Like, it doesn't do very well with hands and such, but it does better with bigger areas. So if you give it this whole chest area, you can replace that with chainmail or something like that. So it works better that way. So this is for image generation. And then the other tool I use is Claude. So Claude does a very good job at creating stories. So what I'm going to do is prompt it, just a real basic demo here. I'll say, please create an outline for a one-shot adventure for the 2024 5e D&D rule set with a theme, with a themed Greyhawk setting, and for levels 4 through 5 for player levels. So this is kind of the prompt I would give it for a starting point, and I just asked for an outline, not for the entire story. So we'll work from there and see what happens. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and we'll see what it gives us. So when you're creating content with AI tools, it's better to create the content and then build your content around that, instead of trying to force the AI tools to build around what you already have. So it's harder to do it that way. It's not impossible, but it is harder to create content that is unique or that is yours if you've already got most of it written and you're trying to force it into it. It's a lot easier to start from here and work the other way, where you have a concept, you have it, write it, and then you build around that, and it really helps the process. So this is pretty nicely written. Now this can be done in ChatGPT, but I noticed that it does a lot better. So this is called The Curse of Shadow Lake. It's a one-shot adventure for 4th to 5th level characters in the world of Greyhawk. So the adventure background is in the Duchy of Ernst. Near the shores of the near Dive lies the remote village of Shadow Lake. Once a prosperous fishing community, it now lies under a dark curse. 3 weeks ago, the village's most respected elder, Mara Blackwater, disappeared after discovering ancient Soloi's ruins beneath the lake. Shortly after, the lake's waters turned black and the fish began dying. The villagers whisper that they've seen shadowy figures walking on the water at night. So it gives you adventure hook, locations like part 1, part 2, part 3, and then it breaks down the challenges in these different areas. It lists the key encounters, the treasure, possible outcomes, some scaling options. I mean, you can't get better than that. That's really good. So that's a good outline, a good starting point. Now, you might have to fill in the blanks or whatever, but what you might do is, let's just say for the adventure hooks, instead of just having adventure hooks, maybe you want to improve this by clicking the improve button, or you can copy and paste this section here and ask it to make a rollable list or a table. So instead of just handing these things out, maybe you want to roll randomly so that your adventure has a little bit more randomness, a little bit higher replay value, and not so regimented or railroaded. You know, you could do stuff like that. For this, the key NPCs, I would build all those separately. I would flesh out these locations separately. I would write this part. So this is the investigation part. So to uncover the plot, I would build these encounters if necessary. So hostile village members influenced by the curse. So there's 2 cult fanatics here. A shadowy water elemental, like 3 water weirds and cursed fish swarm. So you can use a swarm of kippers if you wanted to, kind of like piranha. There's underground ruins, so you might have to build these. Here's the environment, but then you might have to build these locations. So this gives you a good starting point, and it will do that. So you can do this in ChatGPT too. So I'll take the same prompt, and we'll see what that gives us. So if I go to ChatGPT, and I'm going to start a new section here. So we'll do a new chat, and we'll see what it does. So hit Control V, and let's see what kind of outline we get here. So this one's actually showing me, you know, which of the 2 would you prefer. That includes how it's written, how it's formatted. So far, I'm liking response 2, I think. But for Fantasy Grounds, you don't want all of the HTML, the markup, the tables and stuff. You want it to be plain text. But I do kind of like how this one is written better. But for Fantasy Grounds, you may want something a little bit more generic and a lot less formatted. So when you go to copy and paste this into Fantasy Grounds, it's harder to do that if there's a bunch of markup, HTML, bold, you know, that kind of stuff. It's better if it's just plain text. But it's asking me to make a choice. I kind of like this one on the right a little bit more, but this one seems to actually break this down a little bit more. But they're both pretty decent quality, but I think I'm going to go with number 1. As much as I like this one over here, this one for Fantasy Grounds works better. I'm going to go ahead and like that because I do like the output. And there you go. There's another similar type of outline. So you can do that with ChatGPT. But what I really like is the storytelling aspect of Anthropic over ChatGPT. So this is a difference in quality versus humanization versus, you know, how much you're willing to pay, you know, that kind of thing. So that is a consideration when you're using generative AI tools. So GoogleLM, ChatGPT, Ideogram, and of course the you know, I said ChatGPT already, but you get the idea that Anthropic, Ideogram. So they all do well with certain things. So that's kind of what I've done over the last year or so in researching these types of tools to create content. I usually mostly make role-playing game content, but if you wanted to do household projects or whatever, those would help with that too. You get to the point where you can actually take a picture and the AI tool will analyze it and it will tell you the type of tools you might need, or it might refer you to a video that's going to help you with that task. So it kind of depends on the training data that the AI tool has, but it's pretty amazing that it can take an image and extrapolate that much information out of it. It's pretty impressive. But it doesn't always work. Sometimes the picture quality isn't good enough, or whatever. But it does really make a difference on your input, the quality of input, and what you're expecting for the output to be. So I've spent a lot of time developing my own, I want to say, templates for creating content. So this is something that I wrote for myself and for the community. So this talks about the image sizes for Fantasy Grounds and the recommendations and also the sources. So this will tell you, the developer's guide, but I also put this into some of my prompts when I'm creating content for YouTube. So this is something I would use occasionally if I was going to do a video about creating images, and this would be an add-on to that. Let's see what else we got here. So again, this is just information that I would use to enhance or to add to the content I'm building. So this one is about Gork, the Goblin Orc. These are some of the things that I might include with that particular NPC, although this one doesn't have ability scores. However, the Goblin Orc, this is more for creating a unique race in Fantasy Grounds for 5th edition. So that's what this was. So this kind of template would give your AI tool a format, and you can even give it, sometimes you can give it links depending on the AI tool. So for that particular link, I use the, let's see, we're going to go with Fantasy Grounds NPC, or we'll say class and NPC interpreted text strings. Matakure wrote this article quite a bit ago, but they are still pretty accurate and pretty useful. So this is the thread. This is written probably about 4 or 5 years ago or longer. And you go to the very first post, Matakure did, this whole section here is for players. So player character races and classes and such. And this one down here is for, for NPCs, that sort of thing. So actually this one here is for backgrounds, race, and feats. And this one up here is a continuation of that. And then he has another one that is for NPCs. So this is going to depend on what you're trying to do with Fantasy Grounds, but having this kind of information and using that as your template would give you a better opportunity to generate useful content to input in a Fantasy Grounds. So if you're into building custom classes, backgrounds, races, and such, this type of information is invaluable. You'd use this as a text file to input into Fantasy Grounds, and you also into your AI tools as a template. Some AI tools allow you to upload content depending on which one. Like ChatGPT will let you upload documents. So if you have a document with this and another document with this, then that will give you all or most of what you need, minus the 2024 stuff. There's a few added things here for that. But this is just kind of an example of the type of input that you could use when you're creating content. So this is a really valuable tool if you know what type of information to input or to feed into it. So I made these like templates based on that information, and it really helps with creating content. So it's one of those things where you have to decide, what you're trying to do versus the information output that you want. So this is kind of a tool that I use for creating content. And when you get good at it, or when you get practiced at it, and you start to understand the implications of each tool and what their value is, it really does help with content creation. It speeds things up. And initially, it slows things down because you're doing all this researching, you're getting frustrated. But once you accept that, one, you're never going to be able to fully control AI tools, not at this point, anyways, and then design around the AI instead of trying to push the AI into a narrative that you're doing, because it's harder to do that. I'm not saying it's possible, it can be done, but it takes a lot more work, and you're going to have to feed your AI source what you already have, essentially. Images are even harder. So text isn't as bad. So if you've already done a lot of writing, you can feed that in chunks and then have it come up with some more stuff based on that writing. But if you already have this whole story rewritten and you want to have, an AI tool generate something specifically, it's not always going to give you what you want. So use it creatively and kind of sparingly in certain things, because, for images, it may or may not do what you want. For text, it may do a really good job. It just depends on the AI tool, the type of prompt that you're using, and then also maybe your level of subscription, or, your access basically to the tool. So kind of depends on what you're trying to do, but start using templates to help you generate content. So like this was I was doing a conversion for the Lost Caverns of Sojkanth before it was officially released. I had the old version in a PDF content from the DMs Guild, and I was trying to do it all at once. And what I found is that this context menu with the text, even though it's only text, it was too big. So I had to do it in chapters and sections, and that took a long time. So even using AI tools, it's still a lot of copying and pasting and, cleaning up the formatting and that sort of thing. So it's not always perfect, and it really does make a huge difference on giving the AI tool the type of output you're expecting. And sometimes you don't know that output until you've used it for a while. So make templates. That's probably my biggest tip for you, is practice, make templates. If you're going to publish, publicly and for sale, make sure you tell people you're using AI tools, and don't expect the world. It's not perfect. There's a lot of little things that can go wrong as far as, what type of output you're getting. And to be honest with you, I've gotten pissed off quite a few times with AI tools. So it's not an exact science. It's one of those things where you have to kind of see it for what it is. As of right now, it's not reliable enough or consistent enough to call it good. You have to kind of do your own work to it. And I think that's where a lot of people are kind of disgruntled about, is you can't control it. It is very volatile. It changes all the time, and it can be really, really frustrating. And especially if you're in the middle of something and then all of a sudden it starts acting weird, like it'll hallucinate after so long. So if you use the same prompt over and over and over for weeks or whatever, or even days, you start losing context. So it will forget some of your earlier stuff, and then it'll just annoy the crap out of you. So that's why you use like GoogleLM to put in your chapters. So work on an outline and then build all your chapters and all your different stat blocks and all your tables and stuff in separate conversations, but then store them in like GoogleLM, so you can query those. You can kind of add them together, and then copy and paste that data into Fantasy Grounds in chunks instead of all at once. There's just no way to do that. And if you did it on the back end through the XML formatting, that would even be more challenging, because you have to know exactly the output format it is. So you could do it with XML, but I think that would be a lot more risky and a lot less visibility on what's going on. So I've seen people do that. They'll build entire things out of XML data, you kind of have to know what you're doing, and I don't know enough about it to make sure all the formatting is correct. But there are ways you can do it on the back end too. But anyways, I think I babbled or said enough. I think hopefully that helps you a little bit with considering which type of tools might work best for you. So just as a recap, GoogleLM, ChatGPT, Claude, Anthropic, and Ideogram. So all four of those are good at different things. And generally speaking, just make sure that you practice and you don't use it for everything, and to be responsible with it and make sure that you use a little bit of your own thinking power, because once you think that it's going to do everything, it doesn't. And I think one of the use cases that a lot of people are starting to discover is solo adventuring. So if you give it parameters and you give it your rules and you give it the the output you want, you could really use it for a kind of like a play as you go type thing. But again, remember that it will lose context after a while. So there's only so much token length or memory that it will remember within one session. So you probably want to keep your little adventures to maybe one day or something like that. You don't, once you get past a certain point, and that varies from AI tool to AI tool, it'll start forgetting and it'll lose relevancy. It'll hallucinate. It'll add things that don't make any sense. So you'll learn that as you get beyond that token point or the memory. I think Claude actually cuts you off. It actually tells you to use another prompt or another session, because it kind of tells you, hey, you're running out of memory or you're running out of usages. I wish they would do that more often. Then you would know when to stop. But you just have to know that token length is kind of a estimate. And if you use different languages, or like if you're using German and not English, your mileage is going to vary, because the language itself has less or more characters. There's little things like that, little nuances that you'll find over time. But you guys have a good weekend, rest of your weekend. Happy gaming, and I'll see you guys around next time. Bye-bye.